If you're an expert or consultant trying to get clients online through content, we're here to tell you that short form content and long form content are dead. But thankfully, there's something much better that's working in 2026.
My name is Anthony Winneri.
I'm Tiger O'Shea.
And over the last 3 years, we've generated over $1 million with our coaching business. We help experts and consultants attract dream clients into their business without social media through 15-minute solo podcasts.
So in this episode, you'll discover why compressing your expertise into a 30-second clip does more harm than good for your reputation and ability to get clients online.
The invisible gap that prevents experts without a following online from using long-form content to scale their business.
And finally, how a handful of experts are using a new style of content to build trust and attract clients without burning out on content creation that doesn't feel like them. So Anthony, after working with over 300 business owners and experts, we've noticed a trend, right? Where in most cases, where the person in question is actually good at what they do, that gets you so far because you provide an amazing transformation, get clients amazing results, you really feel really fulfilled doing it. So it's easy for you to carry on doing. And it's no surprise when you get some referrals coming in and your business can sustain a little bit because of that. But then when it comes to scaling to that next level and not relying on referrals anymore, the vehicle is content. And that's where most experts and consultants really start to flatline.
Well, the reason is they don't like it. They don't enjoy being on social media. And it's because they're forcing themselves to do either short form content, which they don't frankly resonate with, or long form content, which also doesn't feel right for them either.
Now, it's one piece of the equation that it doesn't feel right for them creating. But I think people carry it on for way longer than they should because they just think that it's the best way to attract prospects and it's the best method for the prospect. So they just grit their teeth and get on with it.
And sometimes they might get a bit experimental, a bit frisky and do both. Turning long form content into short form content.
Of course.
You know, that whole spiel.
But that is not the grounds that we stand on. We don't believe either of those are the best vehicle for consultants to get clients online and really build trust at scale.
Why is that?
Imagine you're going on a first date and imagine that there's two sides to the coin.
Ooh.
There's you who, it could be you, could be another person. Let's just say it's you asking the other person to go on a date and planning the date and setting that up.
Yo, what up?
And then there's the person on the receiving end who is deciding whether they'd like to go on the proposed date.
Okay.
And there are a few factors here that determine, how likely it is to go well. And the biggest one is, well, what is the date, right? There's obviously a whole spectrum of first dates. And I see that very similarly to the spectrum of content creation, where in this case, short form content is like a speed date and long form content would be like the first date being a whole weekend away to a new country.
Damn, that sounds like a crazy date, but not a crazy first date. It sounds a bit overwhelming, a bit, puts me off.
And I think that's a good place to start. You're talking about the long form there, right? The weekend away. So if I'm asking you, not that we're not, I'm not going to go there. So if I asked you on a date, we just met, hard to imagine because we've known each other since we were 7 years old, but if I asked you on a first date as our way to get to know each other, and I said, hey, Anthony, we're both from England. Let's go I'm going to take you for a weekend away to Lisbon. Different country. So you need to fly there, but we're going to have an amazing time. And I'm sure we're going to have the bond of a lifetime after that.
I'll be like, damn, who the hell is a stalker? And why is he trying to take me to Lisbon for a first date? Especially if it's the first time we're like meeting each other. I don't know you. I don't know. Will I get along with you for 60 minutes, let alone an entire day, let alone an entire weekend? Rejected.
So that's one piece of the equation. You would be like, it's quite the big commitment.
It's a massive
that you
commitment.
Don't know yet.
Yeah.
And it's not just that it's a big commitment. It's the juxtaposition, to use a big word, of the big commitment in comparison to all the other things that you would rather or could instead do with your weekend. I would hazard a guess that out of all the things you could do that weekend, going on a long weekend away with someone you've never met is perhaps one of the riskiest things or one of the biggest gambles of how you could spend your weekend in a way that you would enjoy.
Correct.
And it be a fruitful weekend.
Now, look, I'm not a gambler. Don't like the casinos. That's a bet I'm not willing to make.
And this is exactly what long form content is like for strangers. It's fine if you're Joe Rogan. It's fine if you're Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, whoever, the big media personality who can make hour-plus long podcast because they have that recognition. So people don't feel like they're gambling on a stranger because they're not a stranger. But 4, the consultant who is trying to build a name for themselves online.
When you don't have an actual following already.
Exactly. When you're starting from scratch, you are just the stranger inviting a stranger on a hell of a big commitment when there's much less risky ways they could gamble that time. They could quote unquote gamble that same 60 minutes with a show, a podcast host, or a personality that they already really know.
That's so true. And I think that is the point and lesson that we want to share with people. If you are an expert or a consultant and you're trying to go down the long form route, the reason it's likely not working is because you're asking, like Tadhg mentioned, for a massive commitment from people. People don't commit. They actually take a step back and spend their time somewhere else that feels more familiar, but also isn't a gamble as far as will I enjoy this or will I not?
Now, there's one more side point to make about the long weekend away, which is that's on the receiving end. You know, that's from your, if I'm asking you to do that, we've just talked about your likelihood to do that and what your incentives would be to pretty much not do that. On my end, it's also a lot of work. You know, I have to put in loads more effort to make that happen than, for example, the speed date. You know, I've got flights to book, I've got places to look at, accommodation to choose, need to find out the best restaurants. Do you have any dietary requirements? You know, there's so much things to consider. So it's also a lot more work on my part too. And so although, yes, if things go swimmingly, the payoff can be great, let's not forget that, way more often than not, we're going to be running into 2 main hurdles.
Number one, the commitment you're asking for a total stranger to give to you as far as their time is way too high of a bar, and they'll likely step away. Meaning you'll never even get the opportunity to even try out the first date. Or in this case, turn that stranger into a turn that stranger
into a fat what?
Turn that stranger into a follower who might eventually become a client with long form content. And then the second problem is, even if you did convince that stranger, it requires so much of your time to actually create that amazing first date. And in this context, for the long form content, it takes so much energy to consistently show up every single week with long form content. Now, most experts and consultants don't have that time to even commit and devote to making that a success. So look, Tadhg, that's long form content. I'm clear why it's dead for experts and consultants. What about short form content? Why are you hating on short form content? I thought short form content's where it's at, bro.
Do we have time for the whole list? Because I got 101 reasons.
Well, let's start with just one.
Okay, how about 2?
Let's go for it.
Okay, so if long form content is like asking someone on a weekend away for a first date, short form content is like speed dating. It's quite easy to understand, right? I don't really know how you set it up, to be honest, but you set it up and then you're in this room and with loads of other people, and you basically have like 5 minutes. Obviously, I haven't done it before, you haven't either, but from, it's a cultural reference. You spend a few minutes very quickly getting to know people, and then you're on to the next. And I would imagine, I mean, to be fair, I've never done
that. There's not that much getting to know people in a 2-minute time frame.
Yeah, I would hazard a guess. If I was a gambler, then I would bet that it would be pretty hard to build any kind of trust that could lead to more from that just off the back of 2 minutes, especially when it's not just 2 minutes with you and the other person, it's 2 minutes with you and the other person, and then you swap around, like 10 people or something. By the end of it, you'd be pretty frazzled. Now, with the weekend away, we made it very clear. There's issues for my end if I'm planning it. There's issues on your end about whether it makes sense for you to accept my proposal. Let's look at it through that lens again. So let's say I'm the creator here. I'm the one trying to kind of win the date, or I'm the creator trying to post the short form content. On a speed date, I have a couple of minutes at best to convey myself, my personality, and who I'm at. And in this case, with short form content, you have 30 seconds or less to convey your expertise and your nuance and your personality as someone to work with. So obviously, it's not really a match made in heaven in terms of building trust.
And that's what so many of the clients we work with find so challenging, because you mentioned it's basically impossible to demonstrate a level of expertise that builds trust with a total stranger when you've got 60 seconds or maybe 90 seconds to build that trust, as well as the fact they actually just don't like it. It doesn't feel like them because they're having to force and condense who they are within that short time frame. Again, it doesn't feel in alignment with how they want to run their business.
And then for you on the receiving end of the speed date, Well, you'd probably forget who I am by the end of the speed date session because you've gone through me and 15 other people. But even if I do my best, and obviously, you can make a connection that way, maybe you'll remember one or two. Like we mentioned, you're not getting the best side of them. And this is probably now where the speed date analogy maybe breaks a little bit, because on a speed date, someone might catch your attention enough to then engage more. But imagine the speed date, there was like 1,000 people and you only have 30 seconds. Then you wouldn't remember any of them really. It would be way too overwhelming. And the likelihood that you build trust with any or see something in any of them becomes way closer to zero. And do you see the parallel we're going to draw here?
That's exactly what happens on social media when you're trying to convince doom scrollers who are using their worst minds and are like, I don't know how many scrolls in. I was going to say 30, then I realized actually most people are probably like in the 100th scroll in. You might be the person under 1,000 scroll in. Are they really going to remember you? Not really. They're already in that mode, just swiping, 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 swiping. And that's why it's so difficult to grab their attention in order to build that trust with them.
So look, short form content is like speed dating. Long form content is like asking someone on a weekend away abroad as a first date. Both are pretty out there in terms of things that you would do. And it's not that some people can't master them, but it takes a very particular type of person investing a very large amount of energy into mastering that type of doing it.
And for anyone who's listening to this podcast right now, likelihood is you're not that type of person. If not, you wouldn't be watching this video. You wouldn't resonate with this content.
So you've got speed dating, which is short form. You've got a weekend away, which is long form. What is the middle ground here? What's the middle ground?
Oh, I know. Take them on a holiday away for 1 week. So instead of a weekend, we're going to go on a 1 week cruise to the Bahamas.
No, that's even longer. That's even longer. What's the middle ground?
What if we go hiking?
Yeah, I guess that's the middle ground. Wasn't really what I was thinking.
I could take them to play some water sports.
Any other guesses?
No other guesses, I'm out.
How about a coffee date?
Do they sell decaf?
The drink isn't the point. How about a cafe date?
Interesting. I mean, that would be less time. I like coffee. I can be in and out pretty briefly. If it's not good, I could try it out and then leave. If it's going really well, we could chill for a while and stay there longer. Yeah, coffee sounds good.
That sounds good to you, the prospect, the person being dated.
Old Tiggy predator.
For me, the creator, the consultant, the person instigating the date.
We do both have girlfriends.
We do. For me, the instigator of the date, it also works for me because I don't feel like my heart's pounding out my chest just to express myself through a minute or two. I have long enough for you to get a real sense of who I really am, while not long enough for me to have to do some crazy intense planning to think, how am I going to keep you entertained for 72 hours?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And if I was in the game of doing this regularly to find more and more people, which again, the dating analogy kind of breaks down there. For the content analogy, it works because you're not just trying to do this once, you're trying to do this regularly, sustainably to grow your business regularly and sustainably. You could do a coffee date every week and not run out of energy because the amount of time that goes into planning it and the amount of energy that you give to it is sustainable. Now, there's long form content, there's short form content, there's the speed date, there's the weekend away, there's the cafe date, which would be called what?
Well, if I've got my calculations right, short, long, how about mid-form content?
Whew.
Do you get that? Because it's in the middle.
Yep, I'm following.
And that's mid-form content. I think for both of us, we know that this really is the sweet spot for experts and consultants who don't have an abundance of time to invest in long-form content, but they don't like the idea of condensing their expertise, removing the depth of their knowledge with short-form content. Doesn't resonate with them.
And from the prospect's point of view, it's short enough that it's not overwhelming to try it out. You could get someone to try a 15-minute piece of content, even if they've not heard of you, whereas an hour long is a big ask. But it's also long enough where they'll remember you, they get an insight into you, and there's enough of you to try to want to stick around if they resonate.
And the most important piece about that mid-form time frame let's just say a 15-minute podcast in this regard instead of an hour-long podcast, is the fact that that's a long enough time to build actual trust with an individual, to get a feel of what they're like, but to also be able to experience whether or not they're an expert or not, which again contributes to how much trust you can build with an individual. And look, this idea tag of mid-form content might be new to a lot of people listening, but it's certainly not new to us, because over the last 4 years, we've helped over 300 business owners grow their businesses through mid-form content, specifically 15 minutes solo podcasts.
Yeah, they don't have to slave their life away to some big, new, never-ending hamster wheel machine of long-form content.
So look, if you are interested, if you're leaning in thinking, oh, this mid-form content sounds interesting, I want to learn more. Well, we have a full, or should I say an ultimate guide that breaks down exactly how experts and consultants are launching 15-minute solo podcasts, mid-form style content in order to attract dream clients into their business without posting on social media. You can click somewhere on this page right now that I'm doing my hands there and watch the full guide.